is no secret that the American education system has gotten worse and worse over the past several decades. It is my belief that this is not a bug, but rather a feature of the current system. Nothing is more dangerous to tyrants than a well-armed and well-educated population. By taking control of the schools and filling their administration and teaching positions with their propaganda-pushing lackeys, leftist authoritarians can all but eradicate half of that threat. Federally funded indoctrination camps have become so ingrained in our society that people don't even realize that the Department of Education didn't exist until October of 1979. Essentially, the Department of Education was created just 2 years before the millennial generation was born. While this isn't a video about generational strife, I will record one about that soon. The fact is that you cannot expect someone trained and raised by the state for essentially their entire lives to treat that state with the natural distrust due a ruling body. While the shift from critical thinking to test-taking did not begin with the Department of Education, it certainly accelerated it. Rigid uniformity is encouraged, and what I believe is the prisonization or institutionalization of our children began. The horrifying reality is that in a great many ways, our education institutions mirror our prisons and Department of Correction. The prison system deserves its own video, but needless to say, they do not correct anything. They don't even punish crimes legally. The primary punishment that inmates receive is to be placed in an inescapable environment surrounded by the worst of mankind. One cannot expect a young offender to be put into an environment where assault, deceit, and violation are the norm and safety is a fantasy, and not to become worse and not better. If the assault you receive in prison was part of a sentence, it would be deemed cruel and unusual. So why is putting someone in a situation where it is impossible to escape that assault and you know it will happen any different? Yet we put our children in a similar environment from a young age. It doesn't matter if you are talking about the food, architecture, or the fact that children are trapped on campus legally, or the utter lack of safety. It all mirrors the prison system. The only thing that is truly different is that children are forced to sit and consume propaganda for hours at a time. Even the violence and abuse we so condemn in the prisons can be found abundantly in the American schools. People ask why school shootings are so common, but refuse to address the fact that children are trapped in school, subjected to brutal bullying and abuse if they are even marginally different or socially awkward, force-fed indoctrination, taught they are fundamentally evil because of the color of their skin, their religious beliefs, or simply because they don't agree with everything they are being taught. It is not natural to force children, especially young boys, to sit for hours at a time and have them memorize tedious facts. If a child squirms or acts out, they are diagnosed as having a condition such as ADHD and medicated heavily. The reason this is all not just tolerated by school officials but encouraged is because they are not trying to help children grow into healthy, self-reliant adults. They don't want competence, they want obedience. We see the results of this sort of training in the general response to the recent lockdowns. Instead of ignoring or outright resisting the absurd lockdowns that would destroy the economy and people's lives, people just assumed the authorities knew what they were doing and complied. When mask orders flip-flopped, they complied because they had been taught from early childhood to follow the science and obey the current thing without question. And that is the secondary crux of the issue. Modern schools are less educational institutions and more religious centers. As I discussed in the Priest Kings of Woke video, modern leftism is not a purely political movement. They treat their beliefs in a religious fashion. They try to out-extreme each other because there is no such thing as too much piety in almost any religion. We couldn't question the science because the high priest of science had spoken, and any individual or doctor that spoke out was silenced. It is easy to have all the experts agree on a subject when you remove the credentials of any expert who disagrees. modern behavior turns peer review into purity doctrine. We see repeatedly that when a child is given a writing assignment and they don't engage in woke activism, they are failed. Almost every time, they are also verbally abused by their teachers and fellow students alike. There is no freedom of speech or religion in modern schools. They say that by entering the premises, you give up certain rights. But school is mandated by law, and many people can't afford more costly but free options, such as private school or homeschooling. If something is mandated, and you must give up your rights to engage in said mandated activity, then the right they have taken were not surrendered voluntarily, but rather stripped from you with the threat of state violence, such as forceful arrest. Remember, all laws are backed up by lethal violence. If you do not comply, they say they will just arrest you. But if you resist that, they will use escalating force until it is deadly force. There is no law the state will not kill you over, not even one. With that in mind, we must realize that the state has told millions of Americans that if they don't send their children to state-mandated quasi-religious institutions to have them brainwashed into good little woke drones, that the state will come with weapons and violence to take them. Does this sound like something that should happen in a free society? Does a free society demand you give up your freedom of religion and freedom of expression when entering an educational institution? Does a free society force you to give up your right to self-defense because you entered an educational institution? Nothing about the modern school system is consistent with a free civilization. It is indicative of a state that is intentionally trying to purge critical thinking and individuality from its ranks. It is indicative of a state that is intentionally trying to purge critical thinking and individuality from its ranks. Even something seemingly small, like the breakdown of educational groups by age, is designed this way. Children are hardwired to learn one-on-one from people older than them. Children learn from parents and their older siblings by watching, doing, and mirroring more mature behaviors. If the primary two behavioral inputs children have are their woke teachers and immature children in their exact age group, how do you think that is going to affect their emotional and cognitive development? In the past, if someone was bullying you, there were many courses you could take. You could tell your parents, and they could take real action. You could tell the teachers, and they would actually do something about it. You could deal with it like a man and stand up to the bully. Giving a bully a serving of their own medicine should be praised. Nothing is more toxic for individual mental health and the group dynamics of a school than a zero-tolerance policy. It tells bully victims that they aren't worth defending. It says there is no escape. Many children who are bullied are already socially awkward, and that's okay. It takes all types of people for a civilization and economy to function properly. So why do we tolerate treating awkward kids like garbage? A zero-tolerance policy only reinforces the bully's power. Not only is the bully physically and mentally abusing the victim, but if the kid does resist, he will be punished. This puts the school, the state even, on the side of the bully, because one-sided violence is often easily ignored and swept under the rug, but two-sided violence is often loud and disruptive. So you can't defend yourself. Is it any wonder the victim is given a choice: defend yourself and be in trouble with the school and possibly have a criminal record, or just take the abuse? Is it any wonder that someone who has been taught obedience all their life, that they are evil for their skin tone, an oppressor because of their heritage or gender, that simply being a male is toxic, and is bullied with no chance of escape, at some point snaps? There is only so much abuse that anyone can take. And yes, the modern education system is almost entirely abusive. It abuses the minds of children, it abuses their rights, their learning styles, and even their bodies with the food, forced sedentariness, and physical contact. The entire system is almost purely abusive. It abuses you until your mind breaks and compliance becomes natural. The modern education system is a Stockholm Syndrome factory. It abuses you until you accept your subservient social position to your teachers, bullies, administrators, and authority in general. And that is exactly what it is designed to do. The modern education system is like an abusive animal trainer, dishing out punishment after punishment and seldom any rewards. George Orwell couldn't have written a more dystopian way to educate children. They have been taught to use words like science as a Pavlovian trigger to compel obedience. We don't have an education system, we have obedience schools. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.